It gives you, Bulavinak, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me much pleasure to be here. I do not intend to give a very long speech. As you know, you have a two-day workshop that is fairly comprehensive, and you have the Civil Service Reform Management Unit over here that will go through with you the various steps in respect of implementing the OMRS system, Open Merit Recruitment System. But I think a lot more fundamental to that, I'd like to address a couple of things in respect of civil service reform. The reality is that the Fijian civil service for decades, in particular since the colonial times, as far as many of the structures are concerned, have not changed significantly. The structures have predominantly been the same. The way that we view, in particular in your ministry, the way we view, we have regional subdivisional officers, subdivisional hospitals, divisional hospitals. When was the last time that was relooked at? When was the last time that we had the recategorization perhaps done of these hospitals? What are some of the practices that are currently being carried out within the hospital system itself? What are some of the issues pertaining to procurement? Procurement, I think, is one of the key issues for us from government's perspective. And I think there's enormous potential for reform in procurement as far as medical services are concerned, provision of the systems that make procurement a priority, and the manner in which procurement is done. But I'll come back to that later. Essentially, when a society changes, when technology is introduced, when the demographics changes, when more and more people have access to education, more and more people have access because of electricity, because of internet, because of roads, people become a lot more aware of what they want. People become a lot more aware of their rights. People also have a great deal of expectation. Fiji probably has a very high rate of people who do travel overseas. I'm sure many of you have traveled overseas, many of your relatives have traveled overseas, many of your relatives live overseas or have migrated and live in Australia, New Zealand, the west coast of North America. All of that experience, the experiences that they have there, puts expectations on us. Because if, for example, the level of service in New Zealand and Australia is different to what we have, and that level of service is a lot better, and I don't mean the services in terms of how we treat them, but also the level of treatment that's available. The reality is that if we do not have these visiting doctors in Fiji, there is not one person who can carry out an open heart surgery in Fiji, 24/7, available 24/7. We don't have a team of people. Now, some would say that is actually quite tragic to have a modern day country, 21st century, where tourism is contributing 37% towards our GDP, where people now actually, there's recently a very large international company that wanted to come and have a large conference. About 3,000 people wanted to come to Fiji. They liked Fiji, the destination was very good, but one of the key issues that they looked at was the level of medical services available. They did an assessment of Nandi Hospital, they did an assessment of Lautoka Hospital, they looked at paramedics, they looked at the quality of ambulances we have, they looked at the quality of medical services we could offer, in cases of emergency, because they're very, very senior executives. And based on that, they actually decided not to have the conference in Fiji, because they felt, in their assessment, the people who did the assessment, that it was not up to scratch, did not meet their expectations. So they went to another destination. So it's not just about enticing, though, however, foreigners to come and have a conference. Our first and primary objective is our own Fijian people. What kind of services are we giving them? What are the expectations? Are we meeting the expectations? What type of medical equipment do we have? What is the level of cleanliness in hospitals? I can tell you many horror stories. And some of it is very simple administrative issues. The issues pertaining, of course, like I mentioned, about procurement. Many times you see in the papers saying, oh, we're about to run out of drugs. Oh, there's no money available for drugs. Actually, all of this can be avoided if there was proper planning. If there was a system in place that essentially gave the ability to the people who are supposed to be in charge of procurement to know exactly when to order. They know exactly when or which drugs are about to finish, or what are the milestones you need to achieve before it triggers off the procurement process. These are very, very critical issues. So it's not just simply in respect of Ministry of Health. There are many other ministries that have issues, many other ministries that need to be able to come into the 21st century. I'll give you an example. In 2007, when we were appointed, so I looked at all the staffing of the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice had one position that looked after all the vehicles in the ministry. So there was a gentleman whose job was to make sure that all the vehicles in the ministry was looked after. And guess how many vehicles was there in the fleet? One. But you see, they filled in the position because there's this idea that if you fill in the position, if you don't fill in the position, you lose the position. So the money goes away from the ministry. So let's fill it in any case, even though you may not require it. In the private sector, where I came from, our PA used to look after the vehicles. It was part of her job, not just to do typing or whatever, to look after the office. Part of her job was to make sure that all the vehicles actually went on time for servicing. She did that, it was part of her job. No additional burden. So the point from that is to say that there are many positions that actually we may not require necessarily. Or conversely, there are many positions or the current job description of a particular position, you could include other responsibilities in those positions. At the same time though, we can pay people well. You may have heard that we have been carrying out through the CSRMU a number of evaluations. We've done a market study comparing what you get paid in the civil service compared to what people get paid in the private sector. And as you know that we've already made some movements with the doctors. The doctors have got significant pay rises. There are different categories of the doctors, for example, category A, B, and C. And the salaries have been adjusted accordingly given the level of exposure or the risk that that doctor faces. So what we have done is that we've done the assessment, and we've said this openly. Yesterday, in fact, we had a meeting with the Confederation of the Public Sector Unions. This is our second meeting in about a month and a half, and we're working very closely with them in respect of these reforms. What the evaluation found was at entry point in the civil service, generally speaking, and in most ministries, at the entry point, we pay reasonably well, if not higher, than what the private sector pays. But as the years progress, it dips. I'll give you an example, which is a lot clearer example. In the Solicitor General's office, the lawyers that are paid at entry level are paid very high compared to what they get in the private sector. In the private sector, if you're a graduate lawyer, you can get paid as low as $12,000 a year. And once there used to be $8,000 a year. These people who work for the law firms. Now it's about 12,000, 14,000. People in the SG's office at entry point after university get paid 27,000. Now, if you then compare those same two people, 5 or 7 years down the track, the person who's getting $27,000 is probably hovering around $28,000, $29,000. So the person who started at $12,000 or $13,000 in the private sector is probably now getting paid $45,000. So there was an inability within the system to recognize people's acquisition of skill sets, of people's acquisition of knowledge, of people's ability to contribute to the organization. There's no level of flexibility. So as you know that one of the issues that we have one of the areas that we have addressed is through the Constitution. The Constitution now, of course, allows the respective permanent secretaries to have a budget. Under Seg 1 and Seg 2, they have that budget, which they are given as a package. Now, within that package, they can actually reform the service, look at the positions, and pay according to what the market dictates. And that's one of the fine-tuning, of course, that will be carried out by the CSRMU in talking to the respective ministries. But that's the general gist. So some of the ministries have already started that. They've already started reflecting what the market pays. They've already started doing what we call a very refined assessment of people's progress. So for example, I know again using the Solicitor General's office as an example, they have now they have reviews of individual people's performances. And that review is not only carried out by the Solicitor General, but is also carried out by the subordinates of the person who's being reviewed. So we also need to know how this person is a team, what is he or she like as a team leader. So there's a certain percentage of that assessment that comes by way of the subordinates assessing the people's individual performance. That is also very critical. Now, so what we have said in the reform following the evaluation is that whilst we generally know what the gist of the issue is, and of course there are some issues a bit peculiar to in particular health and of course Ministry of Education, overall though, we have said that every single key positions in the respective ministries will now be assessed in terms of looking at the working conditions, looking at how we can increase the salaries. And we want to do that. We are committed to doing that. As Jane will tell you that we've recently advertised, the group has advertised, they're getting some experts now to carry out that assessment. But one thing I'd like to point out, there's a very old civil service mentality, and that is a lack of recognition of the risk of your position. So, you know, if you're a senior administrative officer, you'll get paid, hypothetically, say, 20,000 to 25,000 or 20 to 30,000. But there's necessarily no space within that old system to recognize the level of responsibilities each person has. So we're actually beholden to the name, the title of the position. So you know, you want to become an administrative officer, then the way that you mark your progress is become a senior administrative officer, and the way you mark your progress is become a principal administrative officer, then you climb the ladder. You're actually running after the title. You are not running about the level of responsibility or running after the level of salary you're going to get. So we found previously that a person may be an administrative officer in Ministry of Health or a very technical person in Ministry of Health, because he or she does not have the level of flexibility to get a pay rise or be recognized for what they're doing. They might see a position available in, say, Ministry of Forests, and then they'll quickly try and apply for that position so they can get a change in salary and get a change in the title. That's what happens, as you know, many of you. I know some of you are silently shaking your head, some of you are actually shaking your head. And that is a fact. We've had people who stayed in ministries for 8 or 10 years, gain a very high level of proficiency and expertise in a particular field, but because there's been no room for them to move up the scale, either by salary-wise, most people are concerned about salaries, or build their careers, they will go to another ministry that's got a completely different set of skill sets that's required or level of expertise, simply so they can get the pay rise. We don't want to do that. I'm sure your permanent secretary does not want to lose people who he has invested in, trained up, etc., and then for them to leave simply because they can get some form of recognition for the work that they have done. That is something we need to stop. And that is what this reform is directed towards, one of the key reforms that is directed towards that. So the good news is that government has made a commitment, the cabinet has already approved this, that we that we will have all of these evaluations and assessments carried out before the end of the second quarter of next year. And this is very intensive work, probably spills slightly over into July. It's very intensive work, and Jane is smiling because she knows it's very demanding, but we hope to do that. The other point that I'd like to make is that, and it goes back again to recognition of skill sets. At the moment is, as I said, the salaries are based on the position description. Now, I was some months back when we went down to CWM Hospital, where Dr. Viren Kapadia, as you know, with the team there, he set up a fantastic team. All of them are Fijians. They do now stents and angioplasty procedures. And the team of nurses that he has, very, very proficient. And he said to me, he said, these nurses can be performing this in USA, in Australia, in UK, and they'll be just as proficient and do exactly the same work. So I started talking to them afterwards, and I said to them, so what's your, these people in the civil service, they go by the title. So what are you, senior nurse or junior nurse, whatever it is. And I talked to them about recognition of skill sets. Now, they would be probably holding a position, say if they're holding a position of senior nurse, and they're working in this very highly risk area of procedure. They could also be, so she would get salary X. There could be a nurse, a senior nurse, working in outpatients, probably putting a plaster on somebody's knee, or a low risk area. Should the salary for these two nurses be the same? Of course not. Because the level of risk, if she makes a mistake in the stent procedure, angioplasty procedure, the consequences are much greater. If she makes a mistake in putting the band-aid over the cut wound, what are the consequences? In the same way in banks. You may work as a teller, you may work, behind the counter, but if you have also an expertise to work in selling foreign currency, where people are locked up in a room and they're selling foreign currency, the risks are a lot higher. A lot higher. So these are the kind of things that we also need to recognize, we need to be cognizant of within the civil service. If we are cognizant of the differences in respect of the performance required of individual civil servants or individual staff within a particular ministry, then we will actually be rewarding them accordingly. Government has a very firm commitment, an extremely firm commitment to ensure that we provide a high level of training to our staff. This is why, for example, we started off with the doctors. We've said now that all their postgraduate studies at the Fiji School of Medicine, if they're employed by government, will be paid for by government. We've already made that undertaking, given that undertaking. We need to do that. We need to get our doctors, we need to invest in our doctors. At the same time though, we also need to recognize that there are certain areas, and I'm not just talking about your ministry, that there are certain areas within the civil service, even within state-owned enterprises, it does happen already in the private sector, where we may not have the necessary skill sets, but we require people to come from outside to be able to fill in that gap. And whilst they're here also, they also upskill our people. It is critically important for us to understand that. Expatriates are required wherever we have the gap, and we have filled those positions. We've taken a very strong position in respect of that, notwithstanding some of the, silly opposition that comes from the opposition. But my point is that we must be focused on ensuring that we provide good career paths. We must be focused on ensuring that the people who work for the civil service feel happy, they feel satisfied, they need to want to come to work in the morning, and they need to be able to provide a particular level of energy to their jobs, to the vision of your respective ministries. That is very, very critical. The motivational aspect must be there. We have seen so many people where in the respective ministries, many ministries in Fiji, where people simply come and they believe their job is just to turn up to work and they get paid every fortnight. There is no, there's a lack of culture that if you, for example, are an administrator, or you may be working in a technical area, or even you may be in an accounts area, how many of your staff actually pick up a magazine or a book or an article that's related to their work and read more about it? How many of them do that? Is there a culture of trying to learn? Is there a culture of just even simply trying to pick up the newspaper to see what they can do that can make their jobs a lot greater? Have their level of commitment been increased? Do they have that level of commitment? I have some wonderful staff who work with me. I'm not saying that this should happen with you. I ring them at 2 o'clock in the morning and they can give me the answer by 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying you have to do that. Sometimes you may need to do that. But that level of commitment must be there. You call them up, they're there for you. They respond to you. So but not all of them will become like that unless you, as senior people in your ministries, provide them that opportunity. Make them feel that they can do that. And I can tell you one thing, is that if you select the right people, as the Honourable Minister for Health was saying, through the OMRS system, if we get the OMRS system implemented fully, you'll find that your jobs will become easier. Right from the Minister for Health, from the Secretary, you as senior people, your jobs will become easier. Because the good strength is, a good leader will always try to have good people around them. People who can contribute. And then your job, whether you're a principal administrative officer, if the people around you, below you, are good people, they are the best people for the job, you as a leader will take all that best knowledge and make the right decision. That is very, very important for you to understand that, for all of us to understand that. You must have the most hardworking, the smartest, the brightest, the people who should be filling those positions to be around you. You don't want criticism. It protects you, protects your positions. It makes you look good, makes your job more difficult. So these are very, very critical issues that we need to address. The Ministry of Health, of course, is one of those ministries that has a very high level of people contact. You have a very high level of people contact, and your people contact is obviously through the nursing stations, the different hospitals, right? The health centers, the nursing stations, the subdivisional hospitals, the big hospitals. You literally have thousands and thousands of people requiring your services every day. So obviously you'll be open to more criticism. And that, of course, we recognize that. How you manage those criticisms, how you manage those expectations is very important. As you know, that government announced in the budget that we will have a complaints mechanism. The PS for Civil Service is working on that, and we hope to, by end of January, get some public traction on that in respect of how people can call. So those of you involved in that, and the PS and Minister for Health, I really urge you to give her all the necessary, protocols, the people, to be able to ensure that we are able to facilitate and put and implement the complaints mechanism. We hope to extend that later on to other ministries too. I can tell you the kind of complaints I've got from people. I've got complaints, people calling me up at 7 p.m. from different hospitals throughout Fiji saying, oh, they're not allowing me to see my father. And it's 10 to 7, visiting hours ends at 7. I'm here and it's already 7 p.m. and they're saying visiting hours are over, but somebody's walked past me and they allowed him to go in. Then some people say, oh, they're doing that because it's racial discrimination. They're doing that because they live in the same village. Or they're doing that because they went to school together. Whatever it is. Now, when that complaint comes, at the moment, the way it's been working is that the Honourable Prime Minister gets a lot of complaints. So he rings up the PS or the Minister for Health. I do the same too. I ring up the PS or the Minister for Health. But that's not a good system to have. The system should be that a person should be able to lodge a complaint immediately to a number, a toll-free number, or email, whatever the case may be. And then what are the various protocols? The issue is not just about lodging a complaint. What will happen after that? Who will respond? Within what time will they respond? Will the person against whom the allegation has been made, how will they be, questioned? Who will question him or her? These are very important issues. That will give a particular level of confidence to the members of the public. It's not just simply good enough to have just a call place and you call them and then the message just sort of disappears into the cyberspace, and that's all. So I think it's very, very important, and I think you'll find from a public's perspective, many Fijians actually yearn for having somebody to listen to them. Many Fijians yearn for people simply giving them the right information. please do not treat members of the public as some sort of parasites. They pay your wages. They pay your salaries. Because of them, we exist. Because of them, we are there to serve them. We have to understand that. We have to understand that. And that, unfortunately, that level of understanding of service does not exist. We have seen so many people who get a promotion. Suddenly that position title goes to their head. They don't want to take the calls. Yesterday I got complaints about a couple other ministries, some of the state-owned enterprises, some of the statutory bodies, people complaining, saying, oh, don't talk to me, go and talk to my guy at the counter. I had one of the ministers who complained to me about another organization where they said that there's about 30 people waiting at the counter, and everybody behind the counter who's supposed to serve them, some on their mobile phones, some on their phones, nobody was just paying any attention to them. And this minister had to walk in and yell at them to get their attention. Please do not treat members of our citizens as parasites. You're there to serve them. So these are some of the realities that will happen. There are issues, of course, with the Ministry of Health, with theft, to put it bluntly. Many of the hospitals where we have given new bed sheets, new cutlery, dishes, equipment, towels, they disappear. I've been to some people's homes where it says CWM on the towel. It's hanging on the clothesline. Pilfering. We have patients that go to CWM, and I've experienced it, some of my relatives go to CWM, where they're told to bring your bed sheets, where they're told to bring your pillows, where they're told to bring your cutlery. It happens. It's a fact. These are some of the issues you need to look at. How do we stop it? Now, I've said this to the Nursing Association too, that they need to look at these issues. They also need to be part and parcel of the transformation of the civil service, and in this respect of the Ministry of Health. These are some of the realities. Of course, I do not want to delve too much regarding some of the issues pertaining to the doctors and why the changes were brought about. As you know, the doctors' salaries, etc., currently sits with the Ministry of Civil Service, but we like to give it back. It should sit with the Ministry of Health. We need to fix up some of the procedures and some of the systems before it does happen. The other thing that, of course, is an issue from government's perspective, and I'm sure the PA is going to talk about this also, is that we need the technical people to be doing the technical things that they're trained to do. The Ministry of Health for a long period of time has had doctors becoming administrators, because that was seen as a means of perhaps, advancement in the careers. Now that we have doctors getting paid the right salaries and appropriate salaries, we want more doctors to be doing the doctoral jobs. We want the nurses to be doing the nursing jobs. We don't want nurses to become administrators, unless of course they go off later on in life and become in some form of training and become an administrator. So these are some of the issues that I hope that you'll be discussing, and these are some of the issues that we think we should be able to work on, to be able to provide the level of trajectory to carry out the reform within the Ministry of Health. We need to also work with the private sector. It's very important. As you know, that the Minister for Health has been getting private sector locums. And for us it was a very simple issue, that if you have a lot of people coming at a particular time in the morning in a hospital, a lot of people like to go to work. Most working class people can't afford to miss work. So they'll have the flu, but they'll simply want to go and get the medicine from the doctor. So they leave their home, they catch the bus at 6:30 a.m., they'll go to the hospital, they like to be seen, and then they can go off to work. We have to understand that many people in Fiji depend on that. Your one action can make a person lose their job. Thank you. Your one action can make a person lose their job. Your one action can have enormous levels of consequences. I had a group of young men who were working near the CWM hospital on a construction site who turned up. yesterday, and they said they are required to work 7 days a week. They don't get paid overtime. They don't get any wet allowance. They don't get any meal allowance if they work overtime. They're not even paid double time, they get paid normal rates. The FNPF is not paid. And this is happening right in the middle of Suva. Now, if one of those persons gets sick and comes across the road to CWM Hospital, and he or she is seen after 6 hours, what do you think will happen to his job? So it is very critical for us to be able to make that level of connectivity between our actions as people who are serving the public and what will happen to their individual lives. We have to have that level of compassion and empathy. Very, very important. We are a developing country, ladies and gentlemen. We have a number of challenges. We have made enormous strides, in particular in the past 7 to 10 years. Enormous strides. A lot of people say that to us. But we still will be able to take the cream if we carry out these fundamental reforms. Fiji will become a much better place. If the level of productivity increases, the level of your GDP increases. If the level of your GDP increases, we have more money to be able to carry out more fundamental changes, infrastructure changes, have working conditions improved, build more health centers, get into telemedicine, provide more equipment. We have equipment sometimes bought, but it cannot be operated because the person who's running it is no longer available. It is very embarrassing to have equipment sitting in the hospital and it's not working. In fact, you'd rather not have the equipment in the first place, because the moment you buy the equipment, you've created an expectation. You are then disappointing people. So these are very important issues. Administration of hospitals are very, very important issues. So I hope that you will please come on board in respect of the changes that we are proposing and recognize that it is the benefit for you also. It's for the benefit of those people who join your ministry. We have some very good people who are working behind the scenes in respect of carrying out the reforms. And we, of course, look forward to your cooperation and your assistance. And I hope that you are able to take that up with the same spirit with which we are trying to implement it with. And we need to be able to get the best people. We need you to be able to feel satisfied with your positions, to be able to do well, and to feel proud that what you're doing is contributing to your country. Because if you truly are patriotic to our country, you will do precisely as what I've been saying. And I wish you a very good workshop. Thank you.